You, oh, you mean when he gets ordained? Oh, the play. Yeah, I don't know if that's being streamed. I'll have to ask Kevin.
I don't think it's being streamed. I want to know more about it.
You know, he did. He sent an email, which I guess we can send out probably next week.
All right.
Yeah. And if you want to see it sooner, I can.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. No, it's fascinating. You don't hear about cantorial operas popping up, all over the place. That's for sure. Definitely something different, to say the least. Yes.
How are you doing? You look better than I do. Older than you, though. A couple of years.
All right. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Moadim l'simcha, and I know some of you I see were at our Seder on Tuesday night, but some of you I know I didn't see, so I hope you all had a wonderful Chag, meaningful Chag, something where you at least got a chance to experience something that, we taken for granted a little bit. Josie and I were talking, and we were going through some of the simple tasks, like figuring out what we're serving during Pesach, and we couldn't figure out why does it feel so weird to be having this conversation. And then we realized it's actually been either 4 or 5 years since we have had a service to serve food in our temple because of COVID and because of the renovation. So that was true of the Seder as well. So to see us in the building, right, everybody that was with us, and to see especially kids running around down there, it was really a very special thing. So, amidst the hardness of this week, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the service, one has to have a certain perspective, especially in these moments, which is to be incredibly grateful for this shul that we have, this community that we've built, and the fact that we are able to, again, celebrate very proudly, very openly our wonderful festivals in this community of Sag Harbor. And really thank everybody that came. And, again, every year there's always things to learn for sure. But it was really very, very meaningful. So in that vein, I want to invite up Ann Silver, who is going to light and bless our Shabbat candles for this evening on page 120. And Ann, how do you feel about trying yourself, or you want to? Okay, you're good. Yeah, that's why I pick Ann Silver. I'm always here to help. I'm always right here to help. It does make it a lot easier for sure. That we take away some of the element of it. Amen. Thank you, Ann. We'll turn now in our Sidurim, our prayer books, to page 130 to begin Kabbalat Shabbat together, very top of the page. Lechu neranina, lechu neranina, lechu neranina, l'Adonai. Lechu neranina, lechu neranina, lechu neranina, l'Adonai. Naria, Naria, letzuri shenu nekadma fana vetoda. Naria, Naria, letzuri shenu Mizmirot narialo, lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena l'Adonai. Lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena l'Adonai. We're now on page 131, Shiru Ladonai, just in the middle of the page. Shiru Ladonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru Ladonai, Baruchu Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom Yeshuato, Shiru Ladonai, Baruchu Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom Yeshuato, Shiru Ladonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru Ladonai, Baruchu Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom Yeshuato, Shiru Ladonai, Baruchu Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom Yeshuato. Turn now to Or Zarua on the bottom of page 132. Or Zarua lahatzadik, uleishrei lev simcha. Or Zarua lahatzadik, uleishrei lev simcha. Simechu tzadikim b'Adonai, vehodu lezecher kodsho. Simechu tzadikim b'Adonai, vehodu lezecher kodsho. We're now on the top of page 134. Zamru l'Adonai bechi nahor, v'kol zimra, b'chatzotzrot v'kol shofar. Hariu lifnei hamelech Adonai, Hiram hayamum lo'o, tebehel ve'yoshveva. Neharot yimchahu chaf yachad, harim yiranenu, lifnei Adonai kiva, lishbot haaretz, yishbot tebel betzedek, ve'hamim b'mesharim. Hiram hayamum lo'o, tevel ve'yoshveva, neharot yimchahu chaf yachad, harim yiranenu. We're now on the adjoining page, page 135, Romamu, which is the last Hebrew paragraph in the middle of the page. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu, romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. And as we slowly work it back into our rotation, the 29th Psalm on page 136. I have to reteach it to Cantor Kevin, that's why. Mizmor leDavid, Havu l'Adonai b'nei Elim, Havu l'Adonai kavod ba. Avu l'Adonai kevod shemo, Ishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh. Kol Adonai hamayim el hakavod hirim. Adonai al mahayim rabim. Adonai al mahayim rabim. Kol Adonai ba'koach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shofer harazim, Vaishaber Adonai et arzei halvanon, Vayakidehem kemo hegel, Lebanon veSiryon, Kemo ben Reimim, Kemo ben Reimim. Kol Adonai chotzev labotesh, Kol Adonai yachil midbar, Yachil Adonai midbar kadesh, Kol Adonai echol elayalot, Vayechesof yeharot uvechalo, Kulo mekavod, Kulo mekavod, Kulo mekavod. Adonai lama buhul yashav, Vayeshev Adonai melech leolam. Adonai hoz le'am hoiten, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. Turn now to L'chad Odi on page 138. We'll do the first, second, fifth, and ninth paragraph. And for the final paragraph, those who are with us in the room will rise and face the doors that we came through this evening. L'chad Odi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Ishmi'anu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad u'shemo echad, L'shem u'tiferet v'litila. L'chad Odi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. L'chad Odi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, Ki mekor haberacha, Meher hosh mikedem nesucha, Sof maaseh b'machshava tchila. L'chad Odi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. L'chad Odi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Fifth paragraph. Hitoreri, Kiva orek kumi ori, uri shir daberi, Kevod Adonai alayich nigla. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabelam. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabelam. Boi v'shalom ateret balam, Gam besimcha u'b'tzola, Toch emunei am segula, Boi chala, Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabelam, Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabelam. Please be seated. We're now on page 140, Tzadik Tamar, just where the Hebrew indents in the middle of the page. Tzadik Tamar yifrach, Keres balbanon yizke shetulim bebeit Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvun beseva deshenim verananim yihu lehagid ki yashar Adonai tzori velo avlatabo. Turn now to the Chatzi Kaddish on page 144. Yitkadal ve'yitkadash shemei Rabbah ve'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'vchayei dechol Beit Israel bagalaha u'vizman kari ve'imeru amen. Yesh me Rabbah mevarach Le'alam li'al me'al maya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudsha richu leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata Tamiran be'alma Veimeru. Amen. Rise for the Baruch Hu on page 146 in body or in spirit. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach. Le'olam Amen. Please be seated. We'll read together now on the bottom of page 149 in English. This is an hour of change. Within it we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? Umahavir yom umevilayla, umavdihil ben yom uvelayla, Adonai tzvahot shemo, El chai v'kayam tamidim locha leinu leolam vahed, Baruch atah Adonai, Hamari var We'll turn now to page 151. We'll read together in English towards the bottom of the page. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol. All these things your Torah gives to us. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love than this holiest of your works and the living language that gives it form? Ki ehem chayinu ve'orech yameinu, uvahem nege yomam v'layla, v'avatcha tasir mimenu li'olamim, baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Please join me on page 154. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha bechol nafshecha ubechol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha ve'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam Beshivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha b'derech u'shochpecha u'kumecha u'kshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'v'hisharecha למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. Let's read together on the top of page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. As we turn to page 158, very top of the page. Ya bye bye bim 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 bam, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye bye bim 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 bam, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye ba 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 ba, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye ba 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 ba, ya bye bye bim bam. Mi chamocha ba'elohim Adonai, mi kamocha Nedar b'kodesh, norat hilot, o sefele, norat hilot, o sefele, yabai bai bim 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 bam, yabai bai bim bam, yabai bai bim 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 bam, yabai bai bim bam, yabai bai ba 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 ba, yabai bai bim bam. Yai b'hai ba 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 ba, ya ba b'hai ba bim bam. Malachutecha ra'u vanecha, bokeyam lifnei Moshe Miriam zeli anu ve'amru, Adonai yimloch leolam va'en. V'nemar kifad Adonai et Yaakov, ugolo miad chazak mimenu, baruch atah Adonai, God Israel. Let there be love and understanding among us, and peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up, waiting to do your will. Ashkibenu is on the top of page 160. Ashkibenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom ve'hamidenu shomreinu לחיים. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ושלום מעתה ועד עולם. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Jerusalem. Amen. We turn to page 162, Veshamru, at the very top of the page. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. עין עיני ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת שבת ויהי נפש. We'll turn now to page 164, and we'll rise in body or spirit as we begin the Amidah together. And from that point on, we'll continue silently. Just a reminder, since the first day of Pesach, we change over to praying for dew, or read Hatal on page 168, changing over from Mashiv HaRuach Morid HaGeshem. So again, that's page 168 for that change. We'll begin together in 164 and then continue silently from there. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufia tehillatech. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. We'll turn now to page 371 as we offer our Misha Berach, our healing prayer for this evening. Tonight in our community, we're thinking of Dan Brown, Andrew Adler, Jennifer Zeligson, Mike Bromberg, Robert Gordon, Leah Ba'at Avraham V'Sarah, Adam Lubo, Rachel Bat Marsha, Judy Greenwald, Sue Wartor, Barbara Goldfarb, Abigail Blum, Betsy Tepper, Michael Klinghoffer, Ame and Warren Cass, Rivka Bat Rachel, Lorraine Danis, David Dowling, Sylvia Devorah Bat Francis, Muriel Hirsch, Michelle Sawicki, Francis Kirschman, Shelley Newmark, Diane Axelrod, Gabriella Spicer, David Kyle Klotman, Lorraine Davis, Kim Birnbaum, Deborah Block-Kroll, Sylvia Orrin, Rachel Bat Ora, Josephine Getling, Lisa Levitin, Peretz Ben Shlomo, and Israel Ben Yitzchak. In addition to those names that I just read, we'll offer the opportunity for those that are with us here tonight to add additional names. We'll start on this side of the room at the front and towards the rear, and then this side of the room, and just ask that those that want to share names, please raise a hand so I don't miss them.
John Randall, Virginia Hero, Jackie Amanda. Tom Gaspar, Peter Espinosa, Chris Hubbard, David Langdon, and Karen Sessions. My cousin Pete Fields. Richard Chupowski, John Graham, Diane Schwartz, Frenchie, Nan Penny, Joe Hare. Honey, Lee Julia, Dennis Carr, Frank Darling, Scotty, Judy Lippy, Lauren, and Dutch. Brooke, Bud Bromberg, Tina Cookie, Robert Marcia, Oppenheimer, and Phil Stanton.
Malcolm Lathrop, Ben Zonta, Charlie Swine, Joel Winkner, Jerry Labrowitz, Lorraine Becker.
Leslie Schiffrin, Bill Winter, Mike Erlowitz.
Esther Octopatel. Shelley Lichtenstein, Mike Fundle, Steve Kramer, and all the us.
Ruth Weisberg, Beverly Windsor, Marcy Catola, Raymond Lee, Eva Cohen.
Berta, did you have? Yeah. Jeffrey. And of course, we invite those watching at home to add the names of your loved ones as well. We'll join together in the Misha Berach in the middle of page 371. Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishe Berach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Now we'll offer our prayer for Israel in time of war. Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, our God and God of our ancestors. You know that the Jewish people are one nation with one heart, and now that heart is broken. O healer of broken hearts, binder of their wounds, be with our brothers and sisters who have been taken captive and with the families of the victims. Watch over the hostages, break their bonds, and bring them out from darkness to light. Proclaim release to the captives, liberation to the imprisoned. Comfort the families, bring them under the shelter of your wings. Bring complete healing of body and spirit to all of the wounded. Bind up our wounds and grant us healing. Tzur Yisrael v'goalo, rock and redeemer of the people Israel, bless the state of Israel, the initial manifestation of our redemption. Shield it with your care, spread over it your shelter of peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Grace them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend us. Crown their efforts with victory. Bless the land with peace, its inhabitants with lasting joy. Shomer Yisrael, guardian of Israel. Strengthen and bless the defenders of Israel, who stand guard on the land and the air and on the sea. May we see the promise of the psalmist realized. You turned my mourning into dancing, my sackcloth into robes of joy. God protect, preserve, and restore peace and well-being to Israel, your people, and together we say, Amen. Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Adim l'simcha. And as I'm sure most of you, we had what I hope was a joyful holiday and a celebration in all the various ways that our people celebrate Pesach, the uniqueness of each Seder. But I think all of us, of course, are also spending a lot of our time watching what's been unfolding on college campuses. And I know that's on a lot of our minds, if not all of our minds for sure. And I wish that I had some greater wisdom, but I'm going to share something tonight that is really scary in actually how much it connects to past events, and deeply personal, and that I'm going to share the words actually of my great-grandfather, Zichrono Livracha, Rabbi Tobias Geffen. I got an email from my dad earlier this week. My cousin Joel Ziff, who translates a lot of this, my great-grandfather's works are spread between the American Jewish Historical Society in New York and the Emory University Library in Atlanta. And that's largely because after several steps between Kovna and there, he settled in Atlanta, Georgia, and was the rabbi of Shereth Israel from 1910 to 1970. So just in case anybody is thinking I'm working 60 years, I'm not sure we could have that kind of expectation. But as an aside, for those that may know a little bit of it, as I've shared it before, my great-grandfather was actually the posek of the southern region of the United States, which means that he was the rabbinic decizer of that region. So when there was something of significance, if the local rabbi couldn't answer it and the state rabbi couldn't answer it, they would eventually get pushed up to him. And as a result of that, and being in Atlanta, he was the first rabbi that gave a hechsher to Coca-Cola. Other rabbis had claimed that it was kosher without ever seeing it. And so he saw it, and my Aunt Helen helped to figure out how to replace things. It's a story for another time. So what I want to share with you tonight, though, is a drasha that he gave to his congregation in the first day of Pesach in 1935. So for those that may not remember their history well, 1935 is the year in which the Nuremberg laws were enacted. So keep that as a frame of reference as I share some of these words. And I will say, as much as it pains me to do this to my own family, I couldn't recreate everything that he taught. There's some complicated midrash in there that if you want to learn it, I'll be happy to teach it another time. But I'm going to try to share as much of the essence of what he shared with his community that night, and then has been had my head spinning for the last few days. The author of the Haggadah cites the words of Rabban Gamliel, first century CE rabbi. Whoever does not make mention of these three things on Passover does not discharge his duty. And they are Pesach, the Passover offering, matzah, the unleavened bread, and maror, the bitter herbs. You may remember this from your Haggadah, right? The responsibility to hold up and for everybody to see these three things. The commentators ask, though, why the three things are not mentioned in their proper order. Since the maror, which symbolizes exile and suffering, preceded the Pesach and the matzah, Rabban Gamliel should have said maror, Pesach, and matzah. So why did he mention maror, the symbol of exile, after Pesach and matzah, which symbolize liberation? So he then begins his exploration of this with, as I said, a complicated midrash from Yalkut Shimoni, which we won't get into tonight, but I'll try to capture the essence of where he continues. So he says as follows: we are amazed that even in this era, when the world is filled with knowledge, again, 1935, when the shadows that rested like a dense fog on the world have disappeared, nonetheless, we Jews still find no rest among the nations. They pursue us now just as they did in the Middle Ages. Even though the lights of knowledge and wisdom radiate the sparks of their brightness throughout the world, even though the gates of liberation have opened, enabling us to live as citizens of the land, even though we are somewhat free to throw off the yoke of exile from our necks and find protection in the laws of the land, In spite of this, the security is not permanent. While the nations offer us the tokens of friendship with the right hand, they continue to oppress us with the left hand. In this case, for those that wouldn't know, he's quoting a famous line from the Talmud from Sechet Sanhedrin. Even after Pesach and Matzah, even when we have obtained freedom and the nations have broken the yoke of exile from our necks, nonetheless, maror, the bitterness of exile comes again. And for this reason, says my great-grandfather, Rabban Gamliel mentions the three things in that particular order. But why, he continues, do our people experience maror after Pesach and Matzah? The true source of this predicament stems from the inability of Israel to unify, from a lack of solidarity. When we are like the bricks in a fortress wall, when each of us depends upon the other without division, then no nation can rule over us. We can therefore understand why Rabban Gamliel required that each person mention three things to fulfill his obligation on Pesach. He wanted us to be aware of how days of darkness and suffering for the Jews have followed days of freedom and liberty. He wanted us to be aware that this occurs because we lack unity. Indeed, we observe in this age of modern advanced civilization, and again, 1935, with its new inventions like radio and the airplane, he could not even begin to have imagined the world that we live in. In this enlightened era, as he describes it, we see a regressive trend in the intense hate for Jews in all the emancipated nations. Anti-Semitism spreads in the free nations which exult in their ideals of, quote, justice and love of their fellow man. Is this not amazing and strange? Rabban Gamliel teaches us not to be amazed. This phenomena has occurred throughout history, even in Egypt. At first, the Egyptians seemed to befriend the Jews. This is Pesach and Matzah. But maror and hard labor followed the friendship and brotherly love. This is what Rabban Gamliel wanted to teach us in his instruction to recall Pesach, Matzah, and maror on Passover, precisely in that order. When the sun shines in some country for the Jews and they have succeeded in becoming equal citizens without regard to religion or nationality, we imagine that this marks the redemption of Israel and the beginning of the liberation of the world, that we need not hope and work for the return to Zion and Jerusalem. We must not imagine that we can live securely in exile among the nations, nor think that we can abandon our brethren. God forbid that we have such thoughts, for it was this way in the exile of Egypt. There too it was at first light and freedom for the Jews, symbolized by the Pesach and Matzah. But then came the maror. So it has been in every period of our wanderings. After the sunshine came the clouds and rain. So I say to you today, my dear brothers and friends, again, him speaking to his own congregation of Orthodox Jews in Atlanta in 1935, if you see that the community has deteriorated, if you cannot understand how we have fallen to such depths after having attained such heights, both spiritually and materially, it is because complete unity does not prevail among you. What one says is good, the other says is bad. If one says day, the other says night. Because of this, you experience maror, bitterness and suffering. After having eaten Pesach and Matzah, after having reached a high level, the wheel has turned, bringing maror. If in truth you wish to return to your previous condition and stand at a high level, you must unite. Throw off divisiveness and gratuitous hate, sinat chinam. So how do we unify, he asks rhetorically. And the answer can be found in a book that I had to look up because I had no idea what he was talking about, called Sefer Tishbi. It turns out to be fascinating, and I will teach it another time, but it's, for your purposes, 16th century Italy. After the Israelites left Egypt, he teaches, the Egyptians chased them to the shores of the Red Sea, but when darkness fell, both camps stopped. So the one could not come near the other all through the night. So you have to imagine in your mind the moment before the parting of the seas, there is a break, and a sort of cloud of magic godness comes down between the two and separates the two camps. They can't get near each other. There's something defining them. In Hebrew, just so you know, I'm going to skip that part of it, but in the Hebrew, this mimics almost exactly another phrase from a very different part of our tradition. Okay, the Baal HaTurim, this is one of the great rabbis of history who helps us in ways, again, I can't get into tonight, but another time, draws a parallel to another phrase with similar language in which we hear the angels call out to each other, holy, 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 Adonai of hosts. For those that may be less familiar with your liturgy, we're going to do it tomorrow morning as part of our services, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot. That liturgy is based on an image of the angels standing on either side of God and saying this to each other, right, in some amount of unity. The similarity, he says, in the language is no coincidence. It shows us the proper path to follow whenever darkness covers the land. Full perfection, my great-grandfather says, is attained only when the instruction derived from the verse, and the one didn't come near the other, the reference to the moment before the parting of the seas, is combined with the instruction learned from Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. We must come together and then unify. Separate individuals must come close and become as one to do the will of their Father in heaven. I'll explain that piece of it in a second, right? Remember again who he was. He was as orthodox a rabbi as you would ever find. His image is based in the theology and the faith of the way that he was raised and taught and lived, in which he believed that following the mitzvot, following the commandments, following the things that we have been commanded to do in the Torah and in the rabbis' deliberations in the Talmud, that was his path, right? When things got off track, that's the way to get back. In our days, he says, the feeling of divisiveness has grown like a plague in the house of Israel, causing desolation in our lives. The phrase is split in half. There are those who adhere only to the first part, and one calls to another. In journals and newspapers, they call out in a loud voice, children of Israel, be as one. But they stop here and make a separation between themselves and between those who say, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. In other words, he's identifying what has been a constant challenge since emancipation, which is the relationship between Jews like himself, who are, again, following the mitzvot to the letter, who are living in a life in which this image of holy, holy, holy is the most important thing. And then on the other side are the people, quite frankly, his connection to the Coca-Cola family, most likely, right? People in his congregation who at that point had started to, for lack of a better term, assimilate, right? Who had started to look a little different, act a little different, talk a little different, right? That was the divisiveness of his day and seeing that. Okay, the latter half they do not cherish nor honestly fulfill. In contrast to these, a second group upholds the last half of the verse, right? They say, holy, 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 the Lord of hosts. But they do not uphold the first part of the verse. So in other words, both of these camps, the religious, the not religious, those that support, in that point, 1935, again, the ideas of Zionism and founding the state of Israel, those that either did not support it actively or were, in many cases, against the idea of it, right? He sees that just within his own congregation, a small congregation in Atlanta, tearing themselves apart. As I said, he could not fathom the reality of what we face today. So he says, there will not be of one mind until a spirit descends from on high and awakens in their hearts the feelings of peace. And then they will recognize and know that Israel will be cured of its sickness and redeemed from the suffering and darkness of the night of exile only when one will call unto the other and say, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. In other words, when the two camps can find some way to speak to each other, right, to find that unity that has been missing in some form or the other. So there are a number of things that are challenging for me and wonderful for me, right, teaching my great-grandfather's words. And of course, at the same time, his answer can't really be my answer, right? His answer in his day was do more mitzvot, right? Jewish community come together through what had always held us together. 1935 was a different world, okay? He was not a reform rabbi. He was not living in Sag Harbor. None of the things that I think he's prescribing here would necessarily work for us here, but the divisiveness piece that he identifies, okay, I like to think our congregation has stayed pretty unified through some pretty tough times, but don't think for a second that disunity isn't right around the corner, isn't right in front of our faces, isn't one conversation away. And we know for sure that there is a, for lack of a better term, right, a battle being fought, a war being fought on college campuses all over the country. And that war exists between, again, two camps on either side that right now most definitely are not going to hear each other, or not going to hear each other clearly, certainly not in some idealistic kind of way. But there is another battle, which is equally important, and one that I think we do have some say in, which is the internal conversation, right? How we as a Jewish community, how we as diaspora Jews relating to the land of Israel, how we, even within Israel, between the more religious and the less religious, those divides haven't gone away. Okay, October 7th absolutely provided a certain sense of unity for a certain amount of time. But if we're not paying close attention, you can see that a lot of those things are starting to fray. And if they haven't already frayed, they are on the verge of, both here and over there. And if we don't have so much control, right? I mean, to some degree, what's happening on campus, you have control. There are some things that you can do, especially if you are connected to a particular university. You have absolutely the power to write to your university heads to make actions that are beneficial to the communities that you are connected to. But in the end, that is one part of the conversation. The other piece that I think he was worried about then, I am worried about now, very worried about now, is how we talk to each other, how we relate to each other, how we acknowledge the fact that not everybody, even just in this room, is going to be in absolute agreement on everything that has happened, is happening, will happen. So how do we maintain a sense of unity amongst our people when the thing that was easiest for us in the past is not the most obvious choice? Okay, I wish I could say that it would be solved by all of us davening 3 times a day, by following all the mitzvot, all of Shomer Shabbat, all of those things. I wish that that was the panacea that solved the problem. In our case, that it's not going to be the solution. But that does not mean that our Torah, that our tradition, that our history, that our culture, that things that belong to us collectively, and our study of those things, and our valuing of those things, can't provide a certain amount of space for us to come a little bit closer together, right? To bridge the gap just a little bit. So I do want to invite us as a congregation to understand that while our eyes are understandably focused on a present reality in the land of Israel, that we are entering a time period that historically is one that is meant for us to focus on study and on the sense of preparing ourselves over the next several weeks for the holiday of Shavuot, right? When we count the Omer in just a few minutes, every single day between now and the holiday of Shavuot is an opportunity to learn, to deepen your knowledge of your own people, your own history, your own text, to engage in conversation, to engage in tough discussions, to try as best as you can to bridge that gap, even a little bit, to try to bring the two camps just within our own communities together a little bit more, to see each other a little bit more deeply, to honor and respect each other in a more profound kind of way. Because in the end, right, what he's seeing in 1935, right, this is, Nuremberg laws is not yet known, right, this is the beginnings of things for people outside of that part of the world, right? My great-grandfather at that point is living in Atlanta, right, as far away from Kovna, where he came from, as is humanly possible. And everything that he did was not instantaneous like it is for us now. Okay, the man deeply cared about his community in Atlanta. He deeply cared about the Jewish community in America, but he also deeply cared about a state that didn't even yet exist in 1935. He understood then, as I think we need to understand now, that the state of Israel, even in all of its messiness, even in all of its complication, is at the very heart of who we are. And we're not going to be able to solve any problems by running away from things, and we're certainly not going to be able to solve any problems by taking simple ways out of complex situations. Okay? I'm your rabbi. I still feel like I have a lot to learn. A lot to learn. And I'm going to dedicate myself even more in the coming weeks to learning more and more. Not just about our current history, but about our ancient history. Not just about our history, but about our values. Not just about our values, but about what is in our bones. What we are about and what this Torah is really intending to teach us. What God truly expects from us. I don't think we are there now. I don't think that my great-grandfather felt that they were there then. But that doesn't mean that that's our future. Our future is going to be determined by how we respond to the current realities. And we are not on a college campus, but we may have loved ones that are there. We may wish that we could solve the problems for them. We largely can't. But we have other things that we can do. And I will simply say that from my perspective right now, the best thing that we can do as a community is look for every opportunity to bring ourselves closer together, closer to the state of Israel at its very core and its essence, and to remind ourselves that when battles inevitably emerge, that how we respond to them dictates everything that we are, who we are as a people, who we are as a community, and what we are about. And so again, if you are personally affected by this, right, if you're living in the city, if you have relatives on campus, if there's anything that I can do, please come to me. I will try my best. If you haven't done anything yet, if you're part of a community that is really struggling right now, write to them, write to the Hillel rabbis, write to the directors, write to the presidents, write to the board of directors. You do have a voice in it, but don't leave it at that. Activism is wonderful, but it's not enough. Okay, what inspires our activism is what matters a great deal to me right now. And I think that we, just in our community here, have a lot of learning to do, a lot of conversations, hard conversations to have, and I think now is the time to do it. So between now and Shavuot, I hope you will join me in whatever way that you can. Any classes that I'm teaching, Torah study, coming to services as you did, and doing it on your own. Okay, spend some time not just in the current events. Spend some time in the text of our tradition, in the wisdom of our ancestors, in the hopes of our people that are eternal. And I hope and pray that in the days and the weeks and the months ahead, which will be hard, that eventually we'll reach a place that is far beyond anything that any of us could have hoped. A place of peace, the ideal of what our people again aspire to. Ken Yeh Ratzon, may it happen in our days and speedily. Shabbat Shalom. So as I mentioned, we are going to count the Omer as we do, marking the days between the second night, if I remember correctly, of Pesach all the way to just before Shavuot. I'll invite us all to rise. We're on page 570 in our prayer books. Again, page 570. And there is an initial, what is called an ayun tefillah, right? Something to draw our eyes and our attention, an establishing of sort of what we are meant to feel. Again, page 570. And to state out loud, as simple as it sounds, that I am ready to fulfill this particular mitzvah. If there is one thing to take away from what I just talked about, right? If you can stand up and say, I'm ready to fulfill the mitzvah of this one thing, right? Believe it or not, to me, these are steps in a very positive and wonderful direction of learning. So you can join me again, page 570 at the very top, and then we'll offer the blessing below, and I'll mark the day. Hineni muchan umizuman lekayem mitzvat aseh shel svirat haomer. I am ready to fulfill the mitzvah of counting the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al svirat haomer. Hayom arba'a yamim la'omer. Today marks 4 days of the Omer. We'll remain standing as we turn to page 586 at the bottom of the page. Aleinu l'shabech. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye al ratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. Page 591. V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, Ushemo echad. As those in mourning, those observing yahrzeit, to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated at this time. I think first of those who passed in our community in recent months. Russell Blue, Isabel Becker, Bert Bitterman, Julian Busgang, Deborah Fogarty, Richard Gambino, Jerry Goldsmith, Lita Goldsmith, Dr. Sam Gould, Rita Hertzfeld, Jesse Hirsch, Barbara Kushner, Laura Labatten, Sean Leibowitz, Robert Lykoff, Samuel Moskowitz, Jeffrey Nagelberg, James Pappas, Danielle Rigg, Janice Sambol, Harlan Spitz, Barbara Strasser, Susan Wolfson, Vanya Verrett, Alan Stephen Weinstein, and Ron Weller. We also mark the yahrzeit that occurred during the last week for Muriel Binder, Arthur George Bruzewitz, Goldie Gwendolyn Friedman, May Froman, Lillian Gluckman, Herman Golden, Abraham Goldstein, Jean Gottfried, Ruth Grossman, William Grossman, Gerald Cass, Jane Beard Cass, Evelyn Katz, Jack Lieberbaum, Nathan Meyerson, Herman Morris, Margie Pollock, Randolph Racklin, Ethel Sanders, Vera Shaps, Gertrude Schulman Cantor, Edith Schwab, Elizabeth Schwab, Herman Schwartz, Ruth Silberg, Mo Slater, and Jacob Spitz. In addition to those names that I just read, if anyone else is saying Kaddish for anyone I didn't mention, can share their names now.
Doris Jacoby, Merrill Taradash, and Randy Wasserman.
Jeffrey Stafford.
I'll invite the mourners to join with me on page 598, and if it's your custom to rise alongside them, you may do so at this time. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divrach herutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Israel, B'agala b'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach la'alam u'li'almei almayim. Yitbarach v'yishabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav u'yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Please be seated, everyone. Shabbat shalom. And, I know serious conversation is always a bit of a challenging transition to announcements, because announcements are meant to be done with a certain joy in the voice, because that is really what we're about. And, simple things, but big things, including Oneg Shabbat, coming and being a community together, celebrating together, sharing stories, meeting people you never met before, okay? Small things add up to big things over time. Begins with relationships. So please do join us for what is a Spartan Oneg Shabbat because of Pesach for sure. So if you haven't had enough matzah, we've got you covered. But beyond that, we'll see how we do. But please do join us for services also tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. You can join us here, certainly online as well. Torah study at 12 o'clock. Reminder that we follow the Israel calendar, so we do one day of Chag, not two. So our end of Pesach festival service, including the service of Yizkor, the service of remembrance, will be Monday, April 29th at 10 a.m. Service of Yizkor for those, and again, there's no judgment here. Okay, if you come just for that service, I promise you, you will never, ever, ever be judged. Not by me, not by anybody else. Okay, you come and remember your loved ones. Come for 5 minutes and leave is perfectly fine. Okay, but if you want to be here, know that Yizkor for us takes place just after the Haftarah as part of our Torah service. So if I were guessing, probably 11:15, 11:30. But if you can come at 10 o'clock, much appreciated. And certainly, aliyahs to be given out for all sorts of things. Reminder that on Sunday, May 19th, from 9 to 11 o'clock, sponsored by a social justice committee, we are once again, this is right, last year we did this as well, right? Okay. We're trying to connect, again, those that need bikes with those that have bikes to donate. So if you can bring them to the temple between 9 and 11, on May 19th, this will help teens, adults get to work, in particular in the summer, for people that really, this is a life-changing kind of thing. Again, lots of mitzvahs in our tradition. Big one is helping people to sustain themselves, okay? This is a great act, especially if you have a bike that's just taking up space in your basement. Get a little bit of extra love, get it back working again, bring it, and it will make a big difference. So we thank our social justice committee. We know we have a bunch of you in the room tonight, including co-chair Alyssa. We thank you for all of your wonderful work, and always looking again for people to join the committee as well. In that vein, also, I do want to make another pitch, which is for our anti-Semitism committee, which I know is always looking for people to be involved. Even if you can't make the regular meetings, Ann Silver is here tonight. She's one of the co-chairs. I'm sure she would love to talk with you about things that they're thinking about doing, could use help in every kind of way. So Ann's right here, you can wave a hand. And if you are watching at home and you want to connect to Ann, you let me know and I will happily make that connection. Beyond that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. I hope a meaningful end of the Chag, Moedim L'Simcha. And for tonight, we're going to close with what is traditionally a part of counting the Omer, which is a piyut that is known by its first few words, Ana Bakoach. Ana Bakoach, if I'm not mistaken, for the life of me, I still cannot find in our Siddur. So I think every time I say I'm going to print it for you and I forget to, so you're going to probably have to listen more than anything else. But conceptually speaking, Ana Bakoach follows what is not uncommon in a lot of the Piyutim, a lot of the medieval liturgical poetry, that attempts to play with words and to create sort of hidden connections. And, I'm looking, at Ari, who really is much more of a master of Kabbalah in many ways than I am. I know you're shaking me off, but really, like, if you talk to Ari Weller, he knows more about Kabbalah than I will ever know, and I promise you that. But in its concept, right, what Kabbalah is really wonderful at is taking sometimes words on the page that feel like words on the page and giving us one extra layer to think about. And what it's really doing is that each of the words in it are acronyms. They add up to different attributes of God. The 13 attributes of God, what we remember repeated over and over again from the Yom Kippur, Adonai, Adonai El Rachum B'Chanun. We'll say them on Monday. They're going to be read from the Torah tomorrow. Same idea, right? That most of our most positive attributes are us attempting to mimic something that is naturally in God. So the idea of the mystics is that when you're preparing for the Omer, that you focus on one element of God's essence that's meaningful to you in that moment when you say the prayer. And Ana Bakoach is really a beseeching God to answer with a certain strength. It's a prayer that was sort of conceived in days of darkness, right? Its melody is somewhat haunting. And its main idea is we're calling out to God to help us in whatever situation we find ourselves in. And while I said my theology certainly is not as rock solid as my great-grandfather's, that is without question, there is a certain moment in which, when everything else feels out of our control, looking up a little bit, letting go of that modern sensibility just a tiny bit, right? Accepting the idea that asking the higher power to help us, not the worst thing to do in the world. So I invite you to think about some aspect of God that's meaningful to you: compassion, thoughtfulness, love, brotherhood, whatever it might be. Focus on that, and I will sing. And if you do know the melody, I hope you'll join me. Anna bekoach gedulat yemincha yemincha Tatir terura kabel rinat damcha Sahagbeinu torenu noram Anna bekoach gedulat yemincha yemincha Tatir terura kabel rinat damcha Sahagbeinu torenu noram Anna bekoach gedulat yemincha Tatir terura kabel rinat damecha Sagvenu torenu noram Yai lai 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 Yai lai 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 Yai lai 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 Yai lai lai. We'll rise for Kiddush, page 123. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'hatzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon inchilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit Ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh zecher letziat Mitzrayim ki vanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol hamim ve'shabbat kodshecha ve'ahava uvratzon enchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Amen. Chaim. Well, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat shalom. Moedim l'simcha. Come next door and enjoy some matzah. That's okay. No, who would know? I mean, who would know?
Oh, God.
Who would know? Who would know? Anyway, thanks, Joseph.
It's your birthday next Sunday.
Yeah. It is my birthday Sunday. I can't have a cake though. No, I know it's. I know the day, and I.
You can't have a cake?
Well, it's still past.